All right, everyone. I am so sorry it has taken this long. I think you are. Please, in the chat, tell us if we are visual on cameras, because this has been the wildest 14 minutes of us trying to figure out this whole camera situation. But hello, everyone. Welcome to Mysterious Galaxy virtual event. I am, of course, here with 6 wonderful authors. I hope you can see them. Elizabeth Bear, Katherine Addison, Arkady Martine, C.L. Polk, Scott Lynch, and Matt Gladstone. Hello, group.
Hello.
Hey.
Slight time delay there.
Yeah. No, I still can't see anybody else, but I can hear you, so we're good.
Well, Kel says they can see
it as
us.
hard as we can.
Clarissa okay, apparently everyone else but us can see and hear us.
Yeah.
I can see everyone.
Right.
I'm just going to psychically project the images that are coming into me through everybody else, and then that'll work.
Well, I wonder how many
watching
of
out
us
there, I
touched
hope
our
this is the
foreheads
best
at that moment.
picture. I want to see everyone else with everyone. So thank you for sitting in. I'm going to go ahead and disappear just so we can leave it to the authors here. But if everyone can please, thank you for being here. If you haven't yet purchased any of the books for the authors here, and we would love for you to support them. Both Elizabeth Bear and Katherine Addison are going to be supplying signed book plates for any of their books that you purchase. So if you go ahead and purchase any of them, we'll make sure you get them. I can't hear sound. Is it working? Kay, it is working.
Oh, no, it's fine.
I don't know what's going on. All right, everyone. I'm going to leave it to the authors. I will see everyone later in the program.
Arkady again?
Did we lose
her?
her?
No.
There she is.
She's
I
back.
Arkady.
figured it out. I know what I did wrong. Anyway.
Oh,
You're back. Okay. So do we shall we introduce each other?
yeah, let's do that.
Who wants to introduce Max?
Not a question for the panel so much as a comment. Max Gladstone. Max is the author of a book called The Gap Cycle, and also the author of its adaptation, The Ring of the Nibelung. They're both really, really good. Yeah, I mean, kiddie shit, but otherwise pretty good. Max lives in California, and Max has a mustache. I'm really good at Max. What can I say? Well, that's Max. It would be really funny if my microphone was not on. Okay.
Max's actual most recent book is actually called Last Exit.
Hey.
And it's ridiculous.
That is Stephen
Max
Donald's
is also
book, sweetie.
finishing up the 10-year project of the Crap Cycle. I will introduce Scott Lynch, who's best known for the Amber Chronicles.
Yeah, I can live with that. That's not terrible.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Well-known solar punk author.
I thought he was a ribofunk author.
Punk, the inventor of solar and punk.
and Minnesota Thor.
Reasonable.
Jeez.
All right. Who wants to do Arkady?
Oh God.
Oh, me.
I'm not sure there's
please.
a version of Arkady that is sounds more outlandish than actual Arkady is the problem.
Okay.
Canada has volunteered to mishandle Arkady.
Go for it.
Good ones.
All right. So, good people and gentle dames, it is my pleasure to introduce Arkady Martine, a pastry chef, a traveler of the world, and a writer of academic literary chapbooks.
The terrible thing is all of that is true.
I know, isn't it great?
The worst bit.
All right. Well, then I'm going to introduce C.L. Polk unless somebody else wants to do it. Arkady, do you want vengeance?
Vengeance.
All right, I'll do vengeance. C.L. Polk is probably a member of the Unseelie Court, but we're not entirely sure.
I'll never tell.
That's why we're not sure. They have written several books, which, if you read them, you will be forced to continue thinking about them as points toward being a member of the Fae. And most recently, they showed up in Chicago to, oh no, I have a better one. Most recently, they have caused at least 2, possibly lesbians, to transform into a flock of birds on a book cover.
Oh my. Dang it.
Is that
They're on to
causes
me.
that?
Oh
Oh, what happened?
no! All right.
All right.
Max, do you want to do Sarah/Catherine?
Yeah, sure. Now, ladies and gentlemen, pleased to welcome back, fresh from a 5-year stint at Joliet Prison, Sarah Monette, Katherine Addison, and the Blues Brothers.
All right.
Mow, 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 mow.
Bow.
Anyway.
And
I don't think
Sarah,
she's
I
coming
think
back after that.
no, she's gone. Sarah, have we lost you forever? Doom. Oh, good. So she doesn't get to introduce me.
She's got to get the gate receipts to the county commissioner to pay off
Yeah.
the tax lien on the
I-
horse farm.
God.
I will do doubles.
All right.
Yeah, you do it.
All right. Again, I am pleased to introduce Elizabeth Bear, who has many names, who
That's
has
true.
trees gossip at her everywhere she goes, and is a writer of hard space opera, vegetarian cookbooks, and treatises on fountain pens.
I can't argue. Have we lost
Hi,
Sarah?
audience. This is actually what we're like all the time.
Yeah.
We really are like this.
No, we're
Really
sober. This isn't what we're
unfortunate
like all the
aspect.
time.
Oh, true, Scott. We are, I think.
Yeah, the really unfortunate aspect of not doing these things like live, where you can actually see the humans, is that there's no sort of external pressure keeping us on our best behavior.
There is none. I think we have lost Sarah.
Oh no!
No, come back,
Come back.
Nick.
Someone's
Go
on
get
mute.
her.
Oh, okay.
Oh, there.
She's in the chat.
Oh,
You're in the
okay.
chat.
Oh my
What are
God,
you
she
doing
jacked
down
it into
there?
the
Are
chat.
you looking for a shill from the audience?
She's been turned into text.
She got
What is she
into
doing there?
Windows
Okay.
TV and she got turned into text.
I'll try to get her back on.
No.
I'm just imagining like a phantom zone. Bam, bam, bam. No.
Okay.
I think
My
we
video is
did.
frozen, but you can still hear me?
I can
As
see
long
your
as we
video.
can, we're
I can
just
hear
gonna
you.
go with voice. As long as people can be heard.
Yeah, we're just running with it. I think we're all learning something about Crowdcast, and
That is terrible.
Possibly,
Yeah.
possibly we've
Crowdcast
broken
version 2 is
the
terrible.
Crowdcast. Possibly okay. So I guess oh, fantastic. I'm gonna ask my first question, and hopefully in the back wonderful things will happen and Katherine Addison will be back with us, and if not, I know she's a very fast typist. So
Look, there are so many of us because we were prepared to take 40% casualties, so only a few of us may survive.
oh well, wait. Okay,
Oh dear.
so
Bring your own
Here we-
sleeping bags.
the title of this panel is Occupy Gondor, using speculative fiction to interrogate the new Gilded Age. And it's even at the top of the screen. So I'm sorry. The person in the chat who's like, this is slightly less stable than Twitter Spaces.
You may be correct.
We can't even use speculative fiction to interrogate video conferencing that fucking works.
Okay. Fuck, even in the future, nothing works.
We need
our dark cyberpunk dystopia does have more comfortable pants than the one we were told to expect, though. So I will give it that. So given that government is a technology and science fiction is meant to be about creating, interrogating, and examining the consequences of advanced technologies, why does everybody keep writing books about the same 2,000-3,000-year-old forms of government?
I apologize.
Okay, but
all guilty here, right?
I don't know, everyone. What do you have to say for
democracy,
yourselves?
And I have every confidence we're going to do it properly one day if we just keep stabbing at it. Did I say stabbing? I mean,
which are we stabbing?
Shall we stab Empire or Republics first?
Oh gosh,
space capitalism. I guess actually, now that I think of it, the Federation is probably the only,
Was I the first one to? Oh God, I'm sorry.
But
am I sorry? I don't know.
No, I think space republics are relatively rare if you aren't watching Star Trek. At all.
That's a republic. We have no idea what their
Star
Wars
has a republic, but it's weird. It's weird when I'm talking about Star Wars because now there's so much visual AV media that has profusely engaged with all of the original movies in a way that the vast expanded universe that I sort of grew up rooting around and sort of manipulating it didn't. So the old EU novels had a lot more engagement. Some of them did, the ones that cared to, with the day-to-day business of trying to run a galactic republic. So there were committee arguments and procedural issues and people trying to go on multi-world quests to put together a case to lay before some subcommittee on the Galactic Senate, which I, being a nerd, thought was extremely cool. But that does there are some difficulties in rendering that into an engaging laser sword fight, I suppose.
Max, thank you for helping me realize that a bunch of stuff I read when I was 11 on a really terrible couch in Maine is why I have the job I have now. Shit.
Hey, yes, yes.
Well, Arkady got what she needed. So long, suckers.
I think I'm kind of thinking about this because, it's why is it always space capitalism? Why isn't ever a space republic? And then I was thinking, no, hang on, because there's a Canadian science fiction writer, James E. Gardner, who wrote a series that starts with the book Expendable, and it's basically it's the idea is that they have an intergalactic republic and humans are just barely allowed in, and all of the explorers, because I think it's called the Explorers series, all of the explorers who go to strange planets or whatever have some kind of a physical disability that means that they're not, visually attractive. But I love this, and it's just basically we're going to land on the planet, we're going to check out the planet, we're going to get into danger on the planet. But behind all of it is just ridiculous politics going on with literally dozens of alien species. And basically the rule is that if you're too violent for them, you aren't allowed to be in the club, at all. So only a few humans actually get to leave the planet.
Ooh.
But I love this series. There's 5 books in it, and it's just fun.
One thing go ahead, Max.
I was just going to like introduce a sort of thing that we can argue about a little bit here. One challenge
that never happens.
Hey, this sort of brought by Kay and chat, bringing up Babylon 5 and as an example of sort of Space Republic or Space UN, sort of a show that's really concerned with politics in many different forms, manifesting from subcommittee meetings to backroom deals to like large movements of armed forces against one another. And one thing that really stands out about B5 for me looking back, certainly setting it against pure shows, is its long-term investment in no polity comes out really as the good guys. I guess like the Minbari maybe sort of sometimes, but in the first season, as extremely uneven quality-wise as the first season is, we're pretty firmly rooted in the Narns, one of the species, being like kind of the baddies. They're the sneaky ones, the stabby ones, the people who are most likely to be responsible for whatever bad thing of the week is happening. And over the course of the series, they kind of become a lot more heroic with respect to our main character's objectives. The Centauri, who are originally like the sort of put upon fallen empire, have this vaguely extremely fashy resurgence, and so meanwhile our main characters are mostly humans. We're sympathetic to Earth government, but then Earth government has its own extremely fashy turn. So rarely does a polity maintain any particular moral valence for very long in Babylon 5, even if there are characters that we're consistently rooting. And that's pretty standout in a series that also has like space angels and space demons and such. And so that, I guess what I'm getting at is it's rare to see that kind of representation of coalition forming and splitting, and like somebody who's been your enemy for a long time, you end up having to make common cause with them for other purposes, and allies drift apart, things realign, which to me feels very much like a part of an active diplomatic or republican system. It's much easier to narratively to have like a bad guy who feels bad under all circumstances and who is unsympathetic. Agree? Disagree?
One of the things I miss about the 90s is that sensation that the rise of fascism subplot on Babylon 5 was avaricious and unlikely. I really miss that. That was like a comforting security blanket.
100%.
You know, we said we said we weren't going to do this, so I'm going to try not to do the thing that we said that we weren't going to do, which is, you know, let's stop and redefine our basic terms for 20 minutes. So let's rehash what science fiction means, and let's
We're not doing that.
No, we're not. But I mean, but the question, why does capitalism keep recurring? Why in our fictions do we keep revisiting?
Not even. I want to draw a line between capitalism versus communism, which are economic systems, and systems of government, because I think that's a line that gets blurred. And you can have, Star Trek luxury space communism, in a variety of post-scarcity universes. Ian Banks. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Like I want to add to be actively confusing. I want to add a third layer, because we're talking about economic systems, like the big frame of like a capitalist versus a communist, or like command and control economy, or a post-scarcity economy, which is another thing. So I want to say post-scarcity versus extractivist. As a frame we could use to like talk about why we get stuck in these patterns, because the thing I have trouble seeing, maybe outside of the work of people in this room, is that there's very little that is in between those two.
And see if that would.
I think Paul Schrader is kind of wiggling around in that space right now, but he's writing very near future stuff. So it's, and also Ruth Anna Emrys's new book. Both of those are kind of like, we're in a transition between an extractive economy and a collaborative economy.
Can anyone come in?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
fantastic.
Hey!
I can't see anyone. It's
We
all
can't
dark.
see anyone either.
Okay.
It's
All right.
okay. We are all invisible.
Yeah,
They can see us though.
that's
You
what
can't
it's important.
see anyone. Okay. So
right.
you are flat-footed for my first attack. I'm going to roll for both daggers.
All right. So, Sarah, did you get the question?
I've heard most of the discussion.
Okay.
So, although I think I've forgotten what the question is.
Why empires or republics? Why not all the other stuff we could be doing?
Oh. Yes. I don't know. I think partly it's just that it's what we all know how to do in fiction. We all know how to write an empire and a monarchy and a republic, but it's harder to figure out how to write something like a democracy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where we're still trying to figure out how to run a democracy.
I think there's something about narrative engines that makes, I mean, obviously it can be done. I mean, we were talking about like the old Star Wars Expanded Universe books with parliamentary procedure. And like, I keep bringing up this example from a David Eddings novel, the third book in the Elenium series, which has the most exciting papal election sequence. It's great. I love it. But we don't have a ton of experience writing narrative tension or narrative drive that comes out of that kind of, not just a single negotiation, but like a layered negotiation. I mean, this makes me want to work out how to do it, but I don't have the instincts for it.
To bring up Star Trek, like you wonder how, in the course of, in the happy event that 500-600 years from now, people are still writing genre fiction and reading it and all that kind of thing. I'm reminded of a throwaway bit in Star Trek Deep Space Nine where Garak and Dr. Bashir are discussing the Cardassian mystery novels that Garak has been loaning to Dr. Bashir, and Bashir is confused because, Garak, the problem is they've all done it. I know exactly from the first page that everyone in the novel is guilty. And he's like, yes, but the question is how and what they're guilty of. And will they be punished? And the implication being that Cardassian culture has been this nomenclatura, like in political infighting, just mess fest of backstabbing for so long that there's really been a profound fictional engagement with it to the point that there's a good, strong popular literature around it. Daniel Abraham has this point about genre being where fears pool, and that I just love as a poetic beat. And it's where we do, I keep thinking that it's maybe even more what we do with those fears, like once they've been identified. And the fears that are associated with empire and the fears that are associated with sort of extractive republics on a Roman model, sort of that kind of bureaucracy, have been around for a really, really long time. There's been a lot, and they're still alive. The emperor can be the CEO. The emperor can be the head of the academic department. The emperor can be the president or the prime minister without changing a lot of the fundamental story structure. The question that's really interesting and exciting to me is what new story forms may emerge if we keep kicking this can on down the road successfully for another few centuries.
To if I could jump back just a moment to the whole, why do we keep seeing the things that we keep seeing? Why do we keep writing the things that we keep writing? There's a very basic, quotidian artistic explanation, which is that borrowing existing cultural baggage, borrowing things that are already freighted with emotional meaning and historical meaning, is a really easy reflexive way to import that emotional and cultural power into your own work, whether that is, reusing Christian imagery, whether that is reusing occult imagery, whether that is, when you conjure in fiction a picture of an empire, a picture of a kingdom, a picture of a republic. I mean, our lives have been threaded with packages of meaning baked into these concepts already that get brought into the fiction. And when you engage in the creation of something that is a little bit less historically oriented or more of a thought experiment, I mean, I suppose it's naturally going to feel a bit hollow. It's going to demand a bit more concentration because it doesn't have that pre-existing set of connotations. And also, as to why we keep seeing so many specific things in science fiction and fantasy, we're largely, not universally, but largely within the confines of this panel talking about English language commercial science fiction, of the last 80 years or so, and not necessarily engaging with a broader picture. And the entire concept of the end of history, I mean, that isn't a concept that starts in 1990. It's not strictly an end of the Cold War experience. There's a particular version of the end of history syndrome that I've always kind of termed 1946 syndrome in my head, which is the fallout of America's post-war image as essentially the only functional superpower in a world that has been reduced to a smoldering ruin. And you can see this in the science fiction that we inflicted upon the world at large, for better or for worse. We and our buddies. There was just this kind of assumption that we'd done it at last. We had achieved America, the perfect place and the perfect government and the perfect set of systems, and that America would just persist. We did it. We solved the problem. There's going to be Space America, and then a future Space America, and then a cross-time Space America, but America will always be.
And all we have to do is keep those dirty commies down.
Yes, we'll have space communism too, but it will suck.
And something like Gene Wolfe's Peace really stands out in this regard as a book that needs to be extremely sneaky in the extent to which it's about America as something that is inevitably going to die. He never can come out and say it, just like he never says a whole bunch of stuff that happens in Peace, but that's the point and structure of the whole book, I think.
And then there's a point at which I was talking about this with a short group of people earlier today when we were talking about climate fiction and sort of what makes that genre interesting and what makes a whole lot of it absolutely very, very dull. And it's the now we're just going to chronicle the death of things version. And like, here is how things get worse, which is, I think, a sort of overactive autoimmune reaction to end of history syndrome in a way, because it is a necessary counterpoint, but it's right this minute in a time of kind of deep uncertainty and deep upheaval and inevitable transformation. People really have gone very far in the other direction. Like, nothing will actually stay in any way recognizable or pleasant. Like, neither one we get.
That actually kind of, that and Scott's comment about republics kind of leads me naturally to my next question, which gets us to sort of the other half of the panel title. When we are talking about a Gilded Age, it's generally used to refer to the robber baron era of the 1870s, but a lot of people, myself included, have taken to using it to refer to our current socioeconomic and political structures. And the reason for the term, the idea that it looks all golden and glittery, but it's sort of rotten at the core. That, you know, it's a electroplated on. And I think we see some acknowledgement / interrogation of that in books like William Gibson's The Peripheral, Martha Wells' Murderbot books, Malka Older's Infomocracy, that all discuss the problem of kleptocracy. And I was wondering if anybody felt like commenting on that. Specifically, I'm thinking of both Scott and Catherine, and well, Scott and Catherine and Max, who have specifically sort of written books about the kleptocracy. If any of you wanted to jump on that.
I mean,
And silence
I
reigned.
I did too.
You also did.
I did too. I mean, I wrote a book in which, like, the rich are literally feeding off people's souls. I mean, come on.
I was going to get to that.
All right.
I'm being bitten by a jealous cat. I just, if
Aw, I
anybody
love that.
Oh,
Why-
hi, Duncan.
You know, it's like,
Or is it Fafford?
it's Duncan.
Hi, Duncan. Duncan is having a week. Duncan is on a tear. Literally, he tore my finger open.
Oh no!
It's-
Yikes!
Extremely jealous when I'm talking on Zoom.
Maybe
And,
we were watching a horror movie the other night. He might have been a little anxious.
So anyway, back to the kleptocracy.
Okay. Okay. So yes, they do devour souls, but they are Canadian souls, so they are worth less on the monetary exchange than American souls. I'm sorry, that's just the way. I mean, traditionally, like the British soul has been the strongest of all until this week.
Yeah.
That may not be true for much longer.
Rapid devaluation.
Mhm.
You know, see, if I hit him, it's spousal abuse. If you hit him, it's not.
okay.
I am 15 feet above you through a floor, so if you hit me, good for you. I would be impressed.
Looking right at you.
I mean, you know, speaking of naivete, once again, I mean, I remember when I wrote my second novel, Red Seas Under Red Skies. I'm gonna do the in my book thing, but you kind of invited us to do the in our book thing.
No, I asked you to do the in your book thing.
Right.
There's a scene where aristocrats humiliate ordinary people in a giant auditorium, essentially leading them on with door prizes and the promise of riches, and they're basically playing human chess. And whenever you are removed from the board as a human piece, you have to pay a default, which is that you get humiliated in any way that some member of the actual audience wants. You know, whether that's getting your hair cut off or getting pelted with tomatoes or whatever. And I thought when I wrote this, back in like 2006, that again, boy, this is really anvilicious and on the nose and unsubtle. And you know what? The last decade or so has absolutely pounded into my head, which is that subtlety is a luxury for fiction writers. It's not a luxury afforded to us in the real fucking world.
Yes.
Like it's not possible to underline things enough. It's not possible to satirize things enough. Like you will never be able to fully encapsulate the depth of the shit that we face as a species, as a culture, as dreaming sapient entities trying to do better and hoping for better. You'll never be able to spell it out in black and white as awfully as it needs to be spelled out. So I do not regret my anvils. I'm going to throw more anvils. I mean, and this informed our recent listen. We traveling to Worldcon listened to Rebecca Kwong's Babel, on audiobook, about half of it on the way there, half of it on the way back. And I mean, that book is anvilicious as hell. That book is a giant cannon that fires anvils. And when you're buried in anvils, it drops anvils on your family. It deals with everything that it deals with in exactly the way that it should. All the concepts that it's dealing with, imperialism and colonialism, it leaves absolutely no subtlety whatsoever. I mean, there's nothing obvious on the table when the book is done. It is an anvil flung at your face that is covered in filigreed, infinite detail about everything you need to know about the anvil that is hitting you in the forehead. It is
covered in fractal tinier anvils.
Yeah, it needs to be to make the points that it's making.
Oh my gosh, it's anvilception.
I feel like fiction, to start making broad umbrella statements, because we have certainly been doing that this evening. I feel like there's a desire to answer to the need of the time, or to speak in the language that one needs to speak in at the time. And for those of us who are coming up in the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, I feel like there was a strong, there was a need to, in the face of a moment of real, like Fukuyamaist end of history triumphalism, like it's always going to be neoliberal democracy basically forever, and there's literally no event that could alter that. Like you could slam asteroids into the planet, and fundamentally we would still do things this way.
Shareholder value is the highest virtue.
Right, exactly. So in that moment, at least I felt a lot of pressure, and I was reading books that seemed to feel a lot of pressure to act well, like, oh yes, of course that's the case, but I'm going to push against this narrative as much as possible. Like, we all know things are wrong. We all know something here doesn't add up. And sure, a lot of the people who are saying that absolutely everything does add up and it all works have PhDs and, are the heads of Harvard and all that kind of stuff. But maybe there's still this sort of deep sense of unease. And I feel like a lot of, Tim Powers fiction sort of channels this feeling that there's not going on. And maybe the needs have shifted a bit. Like I look back and I look at, I don't know. The word for world is forest, or I look at which is not a subtle book, or the Lathe of Heaven is not a subtle book. Very few of Chip Delaney's early books are subtle in this way. And there's the Grapes of Wrath, which we think of as a very mainstream literary book, where there's like literally giant, like the banks and the caterpillars that the banks finance are envisioned as these like corrosive monsters that are devouring the countryside. That is not a book that is about pulling punches. So maybe, in a moment where everybody, where there is this powerful consensus that you need to fight against, or sort of that will that's even shutting you down maybe on your own imaginary level. That's an experience that I've had. You need to sort of sneak in and undermine with subtlety. And in another kind of moment, you just really need to get a fucking baseball bat.
So, like, I think, Max, you're like, what, 6 months older than me, or it's the other way around, something like that?
It's possible. Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So do you have a sense of this vibe? Like, do you...
Completely.
Okay, cool. I'm not imagining.
Because you started writing earlier, you attacked it differently than I did.
Yeah, I think so.
In fiction, because like you started the crash sequence like in 2008, like that, like the financial crisis era, right?
It was so. I sat down to write Three Parts Dead in 2008, and the notions around the sequence had been germinating for a couple of years by that point, as a result, sort of bubbling up from work in nonprofit space. So
I spent the time that you were writing early craft sequence, spending all the time I could possibly spend in a completely different century, because that seemed more interesting. And I mean, this is actually relevant because of like my primary experience as a child growing up in the 90s. I was born in 85, was one of a nostalgia I didn't even understand as nostalgia for narrative with momentum. because the end of history stuff was just, well, now nothing happens. I remember, and I look back on this now with a deep kind of horror, wishing that I could have been alive during the Cold War, because things happened then. Oh my God.
You didn't miss much.
Yeah. I mean, you did, but maybe it was worth missing, I think is what I want to say.
You missed so much light entertainment television. You're fine. Trust me, you're fine.
Well, it's just I remember because like you two are about the same age, and like I think I'm the oldest one.
You edge me out by like a year, 2 years,
something like that. Yeah, and so I don't know. I like grew up in this world where it didn't really matter what I did, because there was this thing that was completely outside of my control. And it was whether these two irrational people would get pissed off enough to destroy the entire planet. And like, it was hanging over my head all the time. And so what I was seeing in like the science fiction and fantasy literature of like the 80s and the 90s was kind of this, let's pretend this isn't actually happening and try to figure out, like, you know, what do we want? And a lot of the times what I found was, you know, fantasy especially, was that what they wanted was like good old like American individualist, freaking self-essential, we're just gonna do it, hard work is gonna get you what you want kind of stuff. Oh, also you're special and you get a magical talking knot horse.
Imagine a world in which you could affect the future. Oh, fantasy.
And oh my God, did I ever want a magical talking knot horse?
You are constitutionally guaranteed a magical talking knot horse.
For my fantasy novels is a tiny bit of agency. I mean, I wonder if that's sort of where the chosen one trope really, like, where the attraction to it comes from.
Yeah.
Like,
well, and a sense of like the secret magic world. Certainly, the I don't know, the Dark is Rising thing. I connected deeply with those books as a kid, even though they'd been written in a very different time and for a very different audience. The feeling of like, oh yeah, there is something big that is happening. I'm not entirely certain where it is, but the world is definitely not as the world is definitely not okay. I wonder if you can trace a lot of the rise of the white wolf ecosystem in the 90s to a similar anxiety, and the X-Files happening at the same time. Like there's you know, in the halogen lights of 2022, that kind of fascination with the black helicopters and the conspiracy theory of it all feels more sinister. But I think there's also this just sort of discomfort with a general with a sense of the finishedness of the thing, or the okayness of the thing.
A lot of these literary concepts occur first as freak out and then as power fantasy. Like that seems to be how the reaction cycle goes. You know, that's why you first you get cosmic horror, you get you know, Lovecraft and Ashton Smith and so on and so forth, and you have a bunch of other writers coming along, you know, later in the 70s and 80s saying, yeah, what if I could punch mythos horrors in the face?
So,
you know, repeat that,
Sarah is the least aggressive conversationalist here, and I want to give her a chance to get a word in edgewise.
Floating purple bubble. What say
Sarah,
you?
You have anything to say on this topic? Now that you're on the spot.
I was thinking about the chosen one, and about the idea that, yeah, that something you could do would make a difference. And that is something that growing up in the 80s, it's like, no, nothing you do can make a difference. So I think that may be part, and maybe that's always been true, because that's part of what's going on in fairy tales too. To go all the way back, is that the idea of a fairy tale is that if you're the youngest of three and a poor woodman's son, you can marry a princess.
Mm-hmm.
That it's the same. That, and of course, if you're a German peasant in the 17th and 18th centuries, yeah, no. Whatever's going on in the world, you have no control over it at all.
Mhm.
So I think that maybe that is there is a response, a stimulus response action going on there, between the sense of powerlessness and the stories we tell ourselves about having power.
Thing that I notice about your work, both as Sarah Monette and as Katherine Addison, is that your protagonists are often people who would be secondary characters in most people's work. You know, the protagonists of the Doctrine of Labyrinths are you know, the gay mage and the rogue. To pick a couple of 80s fantasy tropes.
Yes.
How do you feel that narrative choice plays into what you were just talking about?
Well, partly it's the idea that is so absolutely vital if you're going to write fiction, which is to remember that everybody is the hero of their own story. So that the secondary characters in one book, but they have their own story that they're the heroes of. And I think that I found it more interesting to think about what the story looks like from that slightly askew perspective. So that, you know, I'm not terribly interested in the scullery boy who grows up to be king, because we've all been there and done that, and we know how that story goes. And I mean, I'm much more interested in the child who was never expected to become the emperor, growing up to be the king, because he's in such a more interesting place. And it's so much more about negotiating. Maybe that's what I like. It's so much more about negotiating than it is about, oh, I am the one true chosen one, and you know, all of the people who like me are good guys, and all of the people who hate me are bad guys. And we just, you know, go on very simply from there. David Eddings, I am looking at you.
Yeah.
It's funny too, though, because like there's you know, I like Scott's sort of generational point here about as threat than power fantasy, or maybe also the like tragedy than farce construction. Because like a lot of the chosen one juice originally, the sort of voltage comes from the thought that really anyone could be the chosen one. That like this is some random schmuck from anywhere, and often because I don't want to give any like complete explanations of why, but often there ends up being some family connection that's back there somewhere, because we care about where people come from, maybe, or because it's important to explain for some reason why they have the ability to make rocks explode with their mind or whatnot. But fundamentally, you know, reading when you first sit down and read that kind of chosen one story before you have read hundreds of them or read hundreds of works that are jumping off of them, the excitement, at least the excitement for me, was the excitement of, oh, somebody could show up tomorrow, and you know, tomorrow Merthin Lion could show up and say that I need to join the old ones in their fight against the dark, or something like that. That could happen. Probably not going to, but fascinating. But like once you've had 10 of those, or 3 or 5, then the voltage is lost, and the poor urchin becomes like expected to be the king. So so then it's the question of, I don't know, finding always a new thing to do, maybe.
Yeah, the whole concept of humanity proposes, God disposes, seems to sort of underlie that. You've got the just the underneath the whole. Gosh, I could be a king, or I could be special, or I could wield the chosen sword and go save Hyrule. Is just the sensation that actually everything is out of human control. That there are secret arrangements, secret lines of power that actually determine everything. There's a sinister sort of out of control aspect to the whole concept of secret truths, chosen ones, etc.
And I think I just had a thought, and that is that that's the other side of the coin of people thinking that they can be like self-made men. They can come up from poverty, from nothing, and have their own like captain of industry empire, blah blah blah. The whole idea is like, and it makes people incredibly easy to manipulate if you tell them that it is entirely possible for them to become rich and powerful, even though they were born with nothing. And it doesn't happen. The other side of that is, well, the reason it doesn't happen is because all of these ridiculous stories.
Mm-hmm. There are no poor Americans, goes the proverb. There are temporarily
embarrassed millionaires.
Yeah.
It's the Great Expectations thing, right? Or the Horatio Alger, the rags to riches, and the fact that occasionally does happen.
Means that all the rats
more
keep
useful as
pushing
propaganda.
All the rats keep pushing the button.
Yeah.
Yes, because it worked for the rat.
That rat got a cookie. I'm going to push this button. Yeah.
He must have been pushing the button so hard, so good, so long.
Yeah, the lottery is fundamental American narrative.
Yeah.
Deserves got nothing to do with it, kid.
I'm in this self-portrait and I don't like it.
The thing that I wanted to bring up about your work in particular, in regard to Gilded Ages and soul economies, maybe that'll be our next panel, the soul economy. What do you think?
The soul economy.
And I'm not talking about Motown. That was a terrible joke. I apologize.
You do not. She doesn't mean it.
So
folks.
when you were literalizing, and this one probably also goes out to Max. When you were literalizing a metaphor to that extent, does it surprise you when the reader just doesn't get it?
I shouldn't talk about this. I shouldn't talk about this. But the number of times I have clenched my jaw shut and pressed my lips together and counted in my head to stop myself from saying anything to anyone who said, I love Witchmark. It is a fluffy comfort read. And I'm just like, I have to not say anything. Right now, I need to be silent. I cannot talk. I can't say anything. Because if I do, I'm going to be like that girl from Bob's Burgers who's like fighting the air as her mom is dragging her away. I'll see you in hell. Because I just, I don't understand. Did you not notice?
Good commercial sense, very good. That's not what you typically want to do, like at a book signing.
I'm glad you got that
from one who would know.
Did you miss the Soul Factories?
I guess the romance is really, really good because it basically it's like the most gorgeous lampshade I could put on what it was that I was trying to say.
I mean, it's a really good romance, but ugh.
Well, I'm gonna go to bat for, like, I think saying fluffy comfort read might be, and generalizing out from there to the impression that the entire book is about happy things happening to happy people is maybe not great. Like there's a really wonderful core relationship in a pretty messed up society, and isn't that an extremely fluffy and comforting thing, like to anchor as we go through life in people that are close to us and people that we care about? I mean, what else is there on some level?
Well, I guess that's true. They did find love in a hopeless place. If I want to go there. And like, I mean, it is super important that even though like all of this awful crap is going on, that the characters are still like finding and recognizing each other and like managing to like fall in love while they like avert disaster. That's also really cool. I just kind of like.
Well, they kick the can down the road. The
They do. They do. Like, teamwork makes the dream work.
So we're about 56 minutes into the event. I wanted to make sure that we got at least a couple audience questions posed, if that sounds good. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah, sorry, I'm holding up my thumbs. I don't know if I'm visible.
No, you're frozen in time, Max. Sorry.
I'm still in podcast mode.
No.
At least for me. The audience can see us, apparently. Well, this one comes from Kay. Kay asks, we chatted about Hope Punk and Solar Punk in chat while we were having fun times in the background doing tech stuff. The Goblin Emperor by Katherine Addison has been described as the quintessential Hope Punk fantasy novel. Is this accurate? Have others written books that may fit this category of hopeful versus dark fantasies or sci-fi? We have, I think, Katherine here, so what a great person to answer this one.
Answer this question. I tend to call The Goblin Emperor a utopianist book because it does assume that the French Revolution and the Terror can be averted if you get the right person in the right place at the right time. I don't know if that's hopeful exactly, because I'm not sure I believe that it says anything about the real world at all. But
what about everyone else here? What did you think of The Goblin Emperor? Did you get Hope Punk from reading it?
I'm not. I will confess wild about the term.
Yeah, I feel like it's a marketing term from the last couple of years that's been slapped onto a whole bunch of older books, and then with the caveat that this is the new thing in science fiction and fantasy. And when you're saying that this is the new thing in science fiction and fantasy, and you're talking about a book from 1990 or a book from 2005, it feels a little disingenuous to me. But Katherine had a metric that she used to use of noir versus clair fiction. And yeah, so when we talk about like grimdark is also not like a new thing. That like this, it's another marketing category that got invented to describe a thing that has existed since the beginnings of science fiction and fantasy. Mm-hmm. So you have, and I really like Katherine's that noir versus clair. Like in this case, Paul Anderson's The Broken Sword would be the noir version of the story, and The Fellowship of the Ring would be the more clair version of the story, if that makes any sense. I mean, they're both Norse fantasy from the same time period, but they have very different takes on how the world works.
I like.
Alright.
I mean, I've always liked the Noir versus Claire, because it works with the concept of utopianist, and then like you can have Claire or noir utopianist also, but the Goblin Emperor for me is in some ways, I don't know, I find it a fantasy of negotiation that and of communication. That one of the reasons that I really love it is that people have to work so hard at figuring out how to talk to each other, and it works out. That is, I think that's part of what I would like expand the Claire argument or space, that things have a tendency to, with effort, be achievable.
Note that everything you just said, every term you just used there, Arkady, is either an aesthetic or a narrative descriptor of some sort. And just in general, I mean, I find that in terms of a language for grappling with these concepts, I mean, I find that personally and professionally much more useful than things that are more marketing terms like hope punk, solar punk, grimdark, etc. Because I think that the problem with those terms is that they in the way that we use them nowadays on the internets, with the boopity boops, they tend to start out as discussions of aesthetic characteristics, discussions of narrative characteristics, and then somehow transmogrify into discussions of the moral preferences of the people who happen to like those aesthetic characteristics, which makes it less than useful. So everything you've just described, like, you know, that dialectic you were describing, I find much more useful. And
it's interesting.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut my wife out of the Noir versus Claire, because that's where the concept comes to me. That's where it was transmuted to me from. I don't know if it originated with you, Sarah, or Bear, or if it came from somewhere else.
It was Catherine's.
Oh, it was the orbs. Okay, sorry, Orb.
Yes. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. That's her own distinction.
Ah, okay. So from Orb to you to the rest of us. Okay, good.
Maybe a way that's sort of surfacing in my mind to separate or tease out these concepts and these polarities are sort of like what potentials can arise from the interaction of two characters with very different backgrounds and goals in the narrative. I think just because we've said noir so many times, I can't help but think about the juxtaposition of the novel of The Big Sleep versus the movie of The Big Sleep. And in the novel is extremely noir. In the movie, I mean, you would be very off base not to call it noir, but there's a critical difference, which is that in the novel, there's ultimately the detective Philip Marlowe and his own moral orientation in the world. Like that's the thing that hewing to leads to some sort of positive outcome, and it often ends in the end of The Big Sleep does leave him alone. There's not even a great deal of direct emotional access to that the narrative has to Philip Marlowe or that Philip Marlowe has to himself. He's sort of eternally disappointed. And
Dakota had in a gun.
Yeah.
The
Black Knight going out into the world, right? And then in the film of The Big Sleep, I think that, just having Humphrey Bogart there on camera, and it's Bacall, right, who's opposite him. The just charisma between the two of them, and I think Bogart's sort of native desires as an actor to actually like do something a little deeper. Marlowe gets rawer. There's a moment, just one, towards the end of the film where he just totally breaks. he gets angry. He gets like personally invested in the final confrontation in the bungalow. And also, and I think it's not an accident, this is the like version of the film that has the two romantic leads go off together kind of ending. It's pushing it more in that clear direction. There's like, rather than two people can walk together for a little while, but ultimately there's nothing in it. Like that is actually a possibility. And in that way, I think the Goblin Emperor is all about that answer. When two people come together and are trying to walk together in that book, it's possible. It's not easy, and often they lack a lot of shared terms and shared context, but it is possible.
Excellent. We got time for one more question, and I think this one won't take too long. So, what piece of media you consumed recently would you like to give a shout out to? Whoever wants to start that one. If anyone.
Are we supposed to yell about each other's work?
Yeah.
I recently, I talked about this on Twitter. I recently read a novel called The Auctioneer, which is actually not entirely unrelated to what we've been talking about here, because it's sort of a it's horror adjacent. It looks like a horror novel, and it's loved by a lot of horror writers. But it's really more of a thriller of manners, or a sort of dark satire of how America goes wrong. And it was originally published in 1975 by a woman who passed away just a couple weeks after that. She had brain cancer. This is her first and only novel. And it's brilliant. It's amazing. It's harrowing. It's just absolutely, 250 pages that will whiplash your brain and make you go, oh my God, I can't believe it. But it is a novel about all the horrors and lies wrapped up in self-image and economic aspiration and good manners and country traditions, and it is everything. I've described it at length, but it is still indescribable. It is very, very, very good. Grady Hendrix and a couple other people brought it back into print under the Paperbacks from Hell line a couple of years ago, thereby doing the world a service. So, The Auctioneer by Joan Sampson. Yes, thank you. Mysterious Galaxy has the links.
Welcome.
Well, speaking of noir, I recently read a novella by one C.L. Polk entitled Even Though I Knew the End, because I got my hands on an early copy. Privileges of, author life. Sometimes you get to read things early. And it is fabulous. And it is not actually about lesbians turning into birds. That's Max and Amal's book.
I suppose they turn into birds at some point, certainly.
Yes. Yeah, okay, off and on, the birds are on the cover.
Yeah.
Sorry, I could not
continuing
resist,
the Grand Band Books tradition.
Yes.
Bird Wars by Max and Amal.
And I believe that's out this month, isn't it, C?
No, it's November the 8th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So you can definitely pre-order now.
Everybody should read it.
Get your pre-orders now.
It's
Get them
really
early.
soon,
Get them
though.
often, folks.
It is soon. It's good that it's soon. I want to take the opportunity to yell at Max in public about writing Last Exit, because I'm never going to be that good. I mean, not that way,
Nonsense.
and I'm pissed off
You're
about it. And I loved it too much. Last Exit is Max's most recently published novel. I do recommend doing what I did, which is reading all of it on a transatlantic airplane, thinking that, oh, this will be fun, and then realizing that you're in JFK and the flight is over and you kind of don't want to get up. because there's still 100 pages left of the book. So it's, for me, it was like reading a version of Stephen King's Dark Tower, which is also a deeply formative text for me that engaged with the America I grew up in. And it's brutal and brilliant. And I would say that it falls into very distinctly into the Claire division that we are talking about. And you all should go read it.
Thank you. That's making me feel very warm inside.
Anyone else? All right, I guess not.
Yes. No, hold on. I'm sure there's something. I'm looking back through my recent reading list because I have a small child now, so I can't remember anything, including what sentence I said.
Is it there's a monster at the end of this book, Max?
Yes, God, there is a monster at the end of this book is like goddamn classic, and I'll hear nothing against it. Also amazing if you can find those old Sesame Street alphabet books from like the 80s, or there's like A and B. Yeah, they're great. There's an extremely wacky like 5-part Perils of Penelope, Perils of Pauline riff, where Bert is dressed up as Pauline and Ernie keeps getting him into increasingly wacky situations. That definitely boils down to this is why we're all like this.
I love that I was kidding, and Max is actually a walking, talking children's television workshop bibliography.
At this point, it's just going far. So I think this is actually is this Catherine's fault that I'm now extremely digging on Nero Wolfe books? It probably is, isn't it?
Wolfe.
Probably. Yes.
Yeah, man. I've just been burning through audiobooks. It's great. Like it's, some of them are more of the time and some of them are less of the time. But I'm listening. I'm reminded of an introduction to the first Jack Reacher novel, where the author is talking a little bit about coming up with the character of Reacher. And it's one of the best pieces of writing advice that I've ever heard. And it's really made me think deeply about things, which is, nobody ever remembers a Tarzan plot, but people really remember Tarzan. that like it's the character that folks connect to and that endures, and that you can kind of have a model of what this character is going to do or what a character sort of story is. And I don't know, I'd never read Nero and Archie before, and they both really have that sort of diamond hardness to them from that perspective. So it's fun to discover this whole world that I'd never entered into before. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, everyone, we are an hour and 12 minutes in. I think this might be a good stopping point for us. I am so sorry that it had a rough start. Elizabeth, Catherine, CL, Scott, Max, Arkady, thank you so much for being here. I am so sorry it took a while to get started.
Thank you for hosting us, and thank you everybody who showed up and listened to us babble for an hour.
Yeah, seriously.
The chat was super active, and
thank you.
Loving it. This is, even though it had one of the, as I'm calling it, one of the most cursed starts to an event that we had.
Screen full of cursed images.
Yeah.
You all ran with it and you made it your own. And I must say, this is definitely, Elizabeth, congratulations, because you got some wonderful, not only yourself, but some other wonderful authors with you. And this was such a smart and wonderful conversation. And I really appreciate you doing this.
Well, I mean, I just got the people I wanted to have this conversation with.
And you are the ability that you can just do that.
Okay.
Pull them out of the ether. Everyone who's
Old
tuning
factories.
Everyone tuning in, don't forget, if you click the link below, they'll take you to our website for the event page for here. We have all these wonderful authors' books listed on there. So if you would like to get any of the ones that they were discussing, they all sounded wonderful and great. And if you hadn't got them, or if you want multiple copies to gift to other people, it's going to be the gift giving season soon. So go ahead and do that. And we ship across the country and worldwide. Good night, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.